and welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the place to be if you are a sci-fi or fantasy reader. My name is Laura and I am your host. I am a reader, writer, and whiskey drinker here to share with you some amazing self-published authors within the sci-fi and fantasy genres. On today's episode, we have M.K. Williams. M.K. Williams writes suspenseful literary fiction for the contemporary reader. Her body of work is comprised of multiple novels, a collection of short stories, and her nonfiction work includes her self-publishing guides for aspiring authors. Williams' writing influences include a lifetime of watching suspenseful mysteries and action movies and reading Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, Ian McEwan, and Lauren Bookes. After writing and publishing for years, MK launched Author Your Ambition, where she helps aspiring authors. Through videos, e-courses, and books, she helps first-time authors navigate the ins and outs of self-publishing. Her Author Your Ambition series of books cover self-publishing, marketing, and writing craft. But today, we're talking about her fiction. The Infinite. The journey begins. Imagine waking up one morning to a better life, a beautifully stylized home, an elevated position at your job, a cleaner society. Oh, there's a catch. Your boyfriend may be a murderer with access to the most powerful invention in human history. This is exactly how Nina Marks woke on August 8th. Kidnapped across the multiverse, Nina has to navigate her way home. An action-packed journey that will transport readers across several stops in the multiverse. This is a thrilling read for fans of Michael Crichton and the sci-fi genre. See how these parallel universes came to be because of one critical change in history. What if Eleanor Roosevelt had been president? This book was so much fun to read. I love the concept of time travel, multiverse travel, and you can definitely tell in the interview as me and MK really get into it. Let's dive in. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the interview podcast featuring science fiction and fantasy authors. My name is Laura Juntunen, your host and the author of the Shockwave series. Within this podcast, I bring to you all the behind-the-scenes secrets to how these guest indie authors bring their books into the world. If you are a sci-fi fantasy reader, then you need to hear from these authors. Let's learn about the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. Hello, M.K. Williams, and welcome to Read It with Whiskey. How's your day going so far?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So far, I'm having an easy day here in sunny, humid Florida, but it's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited to have you on. And before we were recording, for anyone listening here, I lived in Clearwater for about 8 years before moving to Indiana. And I'm just so sad we never crossed paths. I mean, Clearwater's pretty big, but that'd have been nice to have a writing buddy down there.
Yes, absolutely.
If I ever go back to visit some people, we'll have to do a coffee date or something.
Mm-hmm. Or there's now a St. Pete distillery, like for whiskey. So like on theme. We could do coffee and then we could do whiskey.
So MK, tell our listeners, how did you decide that you wanted to become a writer?
I was an only child, so I feel like that probably is a little self-explanatory as far as like I had to do a lot of imagination, pretend playing to entertain myself. My mom was a very avid reader. I was taught from a very young age to respect books, to revere books, to read. She loved Stephen King. So I was actually reading some Stephen King when I was even in like middle school, his like non-horror stuff, because he has a lot that's not horror. And so I always loved writing. I always loved reading. And so I actually had a period of time where I'm also very good at math. And so all my teachers were encouraging me to go into that field because girls who are good at math are like, that was the thing they were pushing. And I'm not very good at commas and sentence structure and grammar. And so it just seemed like everybody was pushing me away from writing. And it really wasn't until college I took an elective called Writing Killer Fiction through our one seminar we had. And I was just like, this is what I love to do. Like I love writing books and specifically like long form fiction. The assignment was to write a 50-page short story. And I wrote like 100 pages of a novel that wasn't finished. And I thought I was going to fail. And the teacher was like, no, you passed, good job. So that I really got the bug for writing novels early. And thankfully I had the right people encouraging me at the right time to pursue it, even though, maybe my grammar wasn't perfect at the time, but I've learned over the years, that's what editors are for.
Totally.
So
That's what they're hired for.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they catch all your mistakes, even the ones that you didn't know you made. So
yes.
I love that. And we're going to be talking about your book, The Infinite Infinite, which is book one in the Feminina series.
Hmm.
And oh, I'm so excited to talk about this book because I picked it up and it was a page turner. And I think it's because of how it's set up with like the time frames that kind of hop back and forth. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So first of all, tell our readers or our listeners, yeah, readers and listeners, what is this book all about?
So the Infinite Infinite starts out with Nina Marks. She wakes up and she's like, "This isn't my bed." So immediately there's a bit of a problem. But she's in a home with her long-term boyfriend, but her clothes are nicer. He's dressed a bit sharper than usual. She goes off to work and nope, she's not in a cubicle. She's in a large office. Like life seems to suddenly be better. And she thinks it's a very elaborate dream, but it turns out it is not. She is actually in an alternate reality where her life is maybe slightly enhanced in certain ways, but there's still this feeling of like, how did I get here? And like something feels wrong. And that's kind of where the book starts out. And throughout the book, she comes to realize that she has been kidnapped and brought to this reality against her will, that maybe things are not as they seem, and trying to get back home and like get everybody in the right place in the multiverse. And she's not a science nerd by any means. So she has to enlist the help of some friends and some not so friendly people to help her get back home.
Oh, it's so good. And I hadn't really read many books. I mean, I've read a few with multiverses or alternate dimensions or realities that people get stuck in or sucked into. It took my interest right away from the start. And like I said, it's because it time shifts. You get points of Nina's life when she was younger, when she's had her current age, and then you get her alternate realities too. So this whole concept is very intriguing to me. It makes me think a lot. So where did this idea initially stem from?
So the initial idea for this book was actually all set in universe Gamma. So Gamma is the third universe that we see in this book. It started from this idea. I had this one day, I was so frustrated. I was at the gym and this guy was just being so creepy, like so creepy. And it's one of those things where like, you're not doing anything technically wrong, but you're just being super creepy. And I was like, I just want for one day, I want every man on this planet to know what it feels like to be a woman and just to be like, stop being creepy. Like, stop. Like, you're not breaking any laws, you're not breaking any rules, you're just being weird and like gross. And so that's where this idea stemmed from. And so I started writing Universe Gamma, where everything was switched, right? Where like women are in these roles of power that's either implicit or like explicit, like there's laws about it, where men are treated certain ways that maybe they wouldn't like, but it's kind of like, well, that's kind of how women feel right now. And so I started to build Universe Gamma. And I was like, well, how would anybody like realize that this is opposite, right? That like there is another reality that's different from this world that I was building. And then I was like, oh, there's multiple realities. And then it kind of spun into this story. So how it originally began, it was more of the political structure in Universe Gamma, like, and some of the things that are hinted at. Like I have a whole backstory to that universe that like I've never released because then I built out the characters for this and like, okay, now I know how they're going to act in Universe Gamma and what's going on, but it's totally separate. So that was the origin point. And then once I realized it was like a multiverse, like how do they get there? I'm like, okay, so how do they get there? How do they get back? Like, are they going to get stuck there? What if lots of people are traveling? Like all those things back and forth. So very different from the original idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, because, well, I mean, the science fiction aspect of it on its own is tough to figure out because obviously you're not a scientist. You don't know all of the, like, does time travel really exist? All this kind of stuff. But that's interesting that it started out in Gamma. So was that ever something you toyed with, was having the first book be in Gamma's perspective? Because there's multiple books in this series. So why was it that you decided to start with this Nina's version instead of Gamma?
So I think as I started to write this reality, we're like, okay, there's a person who's then dropped into Gamma. I'm like, okay, well, they need the opposite. They need our reality. That's where they're from. And I started to write this character and I was like, okay, well, how does she get there? And like, why would she want to go back? Like what's the thing that's spurring here? And as I started to answer those questions, it really built out. She starts in Alpha. She's taken to another universe, against her will. She's trying to get back. She's trying to figure things out. Gamma is where she meets some people who can help her out. Sorry, don't want to give any spoilers there.
Right.
And things like that. And also like and kind of answering those questions of like, well, why? Like, why does she want to keep doing this? Like, what's driving her? What's that thing that she needs to keep doing? And kind of looking more at like the structure of it to be like, okay, well, she needs to get back because if she doesn't, something bad's going to happen. So like, that's why she needs to get back instead of just like, this seems sweet. Like, I'm just going to stay here. And so I have some ideas of actually polishing up the initial vignettes that I had of Universe Gamma and like publishing those as like a side story to the series. But I need to finish the third and fourth book in the series first. So yeah, I have, and that's kind of the fun thing I realized with writing this book and the series is that I could spin this out into so many different things and kind of just live in these worlds as much as I want, which is like super fun for me. And hopefully if people like it, then they'll follow along. If not, I'll just be on my own in another universe doing what I want to do.
Well, if people are like me, then they're going to love it and they're going to follow along very consistently. And yeah, it makes sense to start from Alpha, which is like our universe, because then the reader can relate, like, okay, putting them into her shoes to see what these other realities would be like, which is just mind blowing for me. And I know that's something that you've said that your writers have commented on, is that it kind of opens your eyes to the what ifs and to imagine like what could alternate realities be like. And I know I personally was like, well, what if I made these small decisions now that could alter my future? And so talk a little bit about that and how that's evolved in your readers' lives.
Yeah. So one of the things when I was even writing it, I was really grappling with this idea of leaving my full-time job to become a full-time author. And so for me, I was like, I was literally gonna have a whole new identity, like a whole new life. Like instead of like introducing myself, oh hey, I'm in marketing at this super cool company, I was like, oh hey, I'm an author, and like really building a whole new identity for myself. And so it brought up these questions of, well, yeah, the what ifs. We all have so many different facets of our personality. So from readers, I do hear a lot of like, which personality is their favorite from the different Ninas in the book. So that's always fun to me, which one that they relate to the most. I hear from people kind of sometimes about the ending, about how things kind of wrap up for the Nina that we see in Alpha, but not necessarily for the others, and kind of wanting to know more. And when I first started writing, I thought it was going to be a standalone. And then about like 80% of the way through, I'm like, no, there's so much more. So I knew it was going to be a series at that point. So I was like, okay, well, you got to read the second book to find out. So I kind of intentionally left some things unresolved for that reason. But that's a lot of what I get from people is like, well, what about this? And what about this? And the answer is like, yes, all of those things did and didn't happen to one version of her out there in the multiverse. And I think there's something beautiful in that too, where like, maybe if you have a regret in life, you think, well, somewhere in the multiverse, I did do the right thing, or I didn't do that thing that ended up being a mistake, or, whatever the thing is. And I think there's something really like beautiful in that. It's like, okay, well, like, it's all good. Gonna work out. So yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting thinking about this concept, and if it is reality, like, okay, we can step into other dimensions, and like, yeah, there could be a world where I'm an astronaut, or there can be a world where I don't even know, I'm a teacher, or, all these different places. But then there could also be realities where you aren't even there, which is really interesting to think about. And so there's this thread that goes throughout the book with Eleanor Roosevelt and how her life influenced how the world may have shifted a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about any of that?
Yes. So some of thinking of Universe Gamma, where this reality where women are kind of in the position of power, I was like, well, how did this happen? Like, how far back did this go? Because depending on how far back you go, I'm like, was the first president of the United States a woman? I'm like, whoa, like things would have been so totally different. I'm like, I couldn't even guarantee these characters would have been born. I was like, so how far back can I go? And I thought a lot about I did some reading, some really dense reading on quantum theory. I read books by Brian Greene, by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I had to renew those from the library a few times to get through them, to really learn about quantum theory and multiverse theory and all the different theories of the multiverse. So I picked a quantum multiverse. There are other theories that would be different, where this wouldn't have worked. But really learning that a lot of the scientific thought on this started in the 1940s with Albert Einstein and some of his work on general relativity, and even some of his predecessors. And I said, okay, so talk about the multiverse starting in the 40s. What's something really big that happened then? And so I was like, well, what if when FDR died, Eleanor took over for him? And I was like, that's kind of a jump. But I actually listened to one of her really thorough and in-depth biographies. And she was a complicated woman, but there was actually talk that while he had polio, that she was working with some of his advisors to help with a lot of the political things going on. So I was like, it might not have been that much of a stretch, that she might have been like, nope, we're just changing things. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I was like, okay, so what if she took over? How would that have impacted the lives of women? Because she was a big advocate for women's rights, women's equality, among other things. So I was like, okay, that's close enough back where I think everybody could still be born who's a character. Some grandparents were definitely still born. Okay, that could work. It's around the time of this atomic age, where some of this is being developed, and some of these theories are being worked on. So I thought that was kind of the perfect inflection point, and just awesome to think that we could have already had a female president or two or three. So that was the fun part.
It's crazy to think, because there's so many different routes the world could have taken if one thing had changed. Like if one thing had changed in the past, and we're not going to get into too many politics right now, but with everything that is going on in our current world, reading this book in this moment in time was very like eye-opening, and like everything was kind of aligning. And I was just like, this is the book I was meant to read in this day and age.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Writing it in 2017 and 2018 was very cathartic.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, so entertaining. I love it. And I love your characters. And I think the reason I love your characters so much is because one character is multiple characters within this book. So tell us, we can't go into like too many spoilers, but who is your favorite character to write within the book?
I think sometimes I mean, I obviously like writing Nina, and any other versions of her because she's the main character, but Marie is sometimes my favorite because she has her own insecurities. She has her own work as a scientist, and the things that go into that because she is a woman of color in the space of science. But at the same time, like her exterior that she shows to everybody is like sassy, like very direct. And I really like that because she can almost add like a levity in some moments where she's like, this is stressful, I'm going to make a joke. And so it's always fun to write her because she's just like, all right, that's awkward. And kind of like helps everybody like quick segue over to what we need to be doing instead. So I really like writing for her just because she's such a fun, she's got a good attitude. And sometimes I need a little bit of that. Like she's giving me a pep talk, like, okay, let's get this going. So she's really fun to write.
She was really fun to read. She was one of my favorites. I liked to see, I mean, I don't want to go into details, but just of all of the characters, obviously Nina, we follow her the most. And so we get to know her alternate multiverse people as the most. But I really liked how some of the other characters were intertwined and how their trajectory was so different, especially on Gamma, how characters are connected and how Nina's own family, her story comes back towards the ending. And so, oh, it's just so much fun. But I don't want to give spoilers. This is the most difficult interview to do because I'm like, I can't say this.
I'm so sorry.
No, but I think it's just, it goes to show that there is so many intricate lines within the book that like once you read it, you'll understand the hesitancy that I have in my own brain as I'm speaking right now. For all of the listeners, like go and get it because then you'll understand. And yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so when people are picking up this book, when they're reading, what type of person is this book aimed for?
So I'd say it's somebody who likes a good adventure. It's somebody who, there's a little bit of history that comes in, a little bit of science. I definitely make it understandable because I had to understand it and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a historian. So I don't be intimidated by that. But like, if you like a good adventure, like if you like reading Michael Crichton books of like, okay, this is a fun adventure, we're all in it together. If you liked watching the show Timeless on NBC when it was on NBC, like this is for you. And so you have to like a good adventure. You have to be willing to kind of make that leap with Nina of like, this scientist is explaining to me how this works. And she's just like, cool, got it. How do I get home? And kind of just accepting that. So I'd say this is for somebody who also thinks about like, well, the what ifs in their life, like what could have been happening in my life instead? What if I had gone to this college instead of that? What if I hadn't broken up with that boyfriend? Like, what if? You're definitely going to enjoy this. And if you have a little bit of like a feminist bent, like this is for you. This is feminist science fiction. This is like in your face. So yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I love that. And yeah, it's going to open up your eyes and your thoughts and you're just going to be spinning. Because I know I had a couple different choices in my own life that I made the choices I did and I'm glad I did. But what if, and it just keeps coming back. I love it.
Yeah.
So with this book, something that caught my eye right away, literally like on the first page, the table of contents that you have set
Mhm.
up in this book. And so I mentioned that different time frames are referenced and they're in different universes. So you have a table of contents laid out in timeline, but then also how it's written in its multiple parts.
Mhm.
Has there been anyone who's gone through and read it in the chronological order? Do you know of?
I did when I was editing it, just to make sure. I was
Yeah.
like, did I mess anything up? So I definitely did that. I don't know. Nobody's told me if they've gone back to read it chronologically yet, but that was something I definitely did to make
Yeah.
sure.
Because I really like that it's set up in a way where like you even wrote if you're somebody who wants to read nonlinear or vice versa.
Hmm.
It's outlined that way.
Hmm.
How difficult was it to keep it all in check? Like make sure all the timelines were flowing correctly.
I mean, it took me, so I started writing it in 2017. It didn't come out to the end of 2019. So it took me several years to really get it all together. I think I had all the ideas, but I was like, okay, so if this is happening, it's tough with the multiverse because everything's happening at the same time. But it was fun and kind of thinking like, okay, this needs to happen on this day, or like August 8th is a very important date in this book. And I was like, did this happen before August 8th of that year or after? And so kind of just mapping it out. And so I literally had like the dates and times on a lot of the chapter headings just for my own benefit of like, what time did this happen in this day? Are we going backwards or forwards? And I even do that in the sequel just because I needed to keep track of it. And so that was super helpful for me. And really calling that out to my editors to be like, I need you to let me know if I mess this up. But it was also like what was going on culturally. Like I did a lot of research on like, what date did this event happen in history to make sure that I'm not jumping the gun. So yes, it was a lot of just a separate note document of like this. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would be tough. Does August 8th have significance to you personally?
There's a few things. And so I have in some of the one of the each part as it starts has like a quote. And so one of them has something about different significant August 8ths throughout history. And so there was one where there was like a meteor that almost hit Earth. There are certain things that were invented. So August 8th is the date I had my very first date with my husband. So that was always fun for us. And there's like birthdays for people in our family on that date. So it's like a very specific one. And it was like, oh, 8, like so we always like that. And then I was like, oh, it's like two infinities. And so when I was like toying with the idea that this would be like infinite multiverses, and I was like, oh, like I can make it all on August 8th. So that was a nice little wink to obviously the family members with their birthday. They thought it was for them. But then my husband, he's always my first reader. He was like, oh,
That's
yeah.
so cute.
So
And yeah, infinity symbol, the infinite. Yeah, 8 on
mhm.
its side. Oh, so many things tying together. I love it.
Mhm.
Did you publish it on August 8th or did you publish it on a different day?
I I was really aiming for August 8th. So that year, that was the year I went from full-time corporate employee plus trying to run my business full-time to just being a full-time author and entrepreneur. So it did not get done August 8th. I announced the pre-order on August 8th,
There
but
you
it
go.
came out on November 9th. It's a significant day for Eleanor Roosevelt. But yes, so I
Which is
kind of
significant in the book
in the
then.
book.
So,
Yes.
oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, even if it wasn't published on the 8th, it was probably published on a day that had significance. So there you go. I love
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so you have written a few other books as well. This is not your only series.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about some of the other stuff that you've written.
So I have my very first book was Nail Biters. And this is in my post-apocalyptic, or it's more like apocalyptic techno thriller series. And actually, when you were talking about your Shockwave series, I was like, I need to read this because I think I'm really going to like it because it's like the world is ending. What's going on? Nail Biters and Architects. So they're part of the Project Collusion series. Architects trigger warnings for everything that happened in 2020 because I wrote it in 2019. Sorry, everybody. So that's like a techno thriller sci-fi. And then I have some non-science fiction books. I have Enemies of Peace. That's more of a domestic thriller. What's going on? We know one house on the cul-de-sac gets blown up at the beginning, but which one is it? And then I have some short stories. I have a collection, The Games You Cannot Win, and a novella, Escaping Avila Chase. And then, of course, with the Feminina series, the second book, The Alpha Nina, is already out.
Yay.
So yeah.
So
So those
exciting.
the fiction books. And then I have a nonfiction series that's all about self-publishing for the first time author, book marketing for the first time author. So it's how to write your first novel and going wide, which is self-publishing outside of the Amazon ecosystem. So I got books.
You've got books in like all the different areas. I love it. I'm gonna have to go back and read your Apocalypse too, the Apocalypse books, because that's my genre right now. Sci-fi is definitely where I've been home. We obviously talk about fantasy here as well, but yeah, definitely sci-fi is my home. I like that you kind of have like a wide range of books as well. But is there anything that you are like, I am saving this for a rainy day, or like, do you have like an idea in your back pocket that you're like, this is my bucket list kind of book to write?
Yeah. So I have a few things I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about that are like speculative fiction. One is like straight up fantasy because it's about vampires. And I was like, I hate that I have to like make this a separate genre because it's fantasy, but like, it flows in. Like, if you know my writing, then you're like, okay, this makes sense for her.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a vampire short story right now. This one speculative story, I think it's a novella. It might turn into a novel. I have to finish the Feminina series and the Project Collusion series. But then after that's done, I have this idea for a very large, ambitious, like fantasy epic. But it's just a few threads. There's just a few ideas right now. So it probably needs like a decade to simmer in my brain and then it will happen. But yeah, I'm really excited about the stories I'm currently working on. So that's where my energy is right now. I'm trying not to get distracted.
Oh, I know the feeling. The feeling. So the Infinite, and then we have the Alpha Nina, and we have, you said there's going to be 4 books in this series?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a timeline for when those are going to be coming out?
Soon.
Ooh.
Ish. So right now I was relating so much when you're talking about the Shockwave series. So I wrote these first 2 books and like, I had an idea of where people were going to end at the end of the second book, because I knew exactly how I wanted the second book to end. And so I'm taking a step back and I'm actually doing some character building for some side characters and actually mapping out, where does everybody need to be at the end of book 3? Where do they need to be at the end of book 4? And then go. And I think I'm going to write the 2 back to back, just so it's done. So yeah, I'm kind of in this phase where I'm taking a step back. I'm working on some character development, some more world building, kind of branching out a bit more in Alpha and some of the other universes, and kind of working on these other side things to give myself a mental break. And then I'm just going to dive back in and the next 2 books are going to be done. So I'm hoping early 2023, we'll see. The nice thing is you've got a time machine. You can just fast forward.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I love that. Yeah. So is there anything within the Infinite, or even the Alpha Nina, where you wish you had put something in sooner, or maybe you wish you had taken something out? I love asking authors that when they're writing series, if there was something they're like, I wish I had put a nugget in book 1, or I really wish I hadn't said that. Anything like that?
There's a few things with Hank and Nina that I wish I had thought further out.
Okay.
I'm not going to say anymore. Okay. Because it's kind of tripping me up now as I'm like, how am I going to make this work? But that's almost the nice thing with the multiverse. Are going to be like, somebody went back and changed the timeline, and that never happened now.
Exactly. I was going to say, you can just make another universe where everything will make sense. You can just forget Gamma. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah. Or I even have like certain advice that was given to Nina in the Infinite. Like, I'm now writing scenes for the 3rd book where she's going back and confronting that person to say like, this was bad advice. And they're like, I gave you the best advice I had at the moment. I'm sorry. Like, maybe that wasn't the right thing. And things like that. So yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I have so many questions, but they're all spoilers. So we can't even go into any more details. I love it. Oh, well, is there anything that you wish the readers would know before they dive in? Like any warnings or anything to get really excited about for the readers?
I would say don't trust what your concept of time is, right? Like, so this whole idea of like, well, time is linear, like it's not. Like, time is a social construct that we've all agreed to what times are, right? So we can coordinate calls like this and we can meet at certain times, or everybody set your clocks back or whatever. Like, time is a social construct. So like kind of go in with that thought of that, like, all things are actually happening all at once. And we have, as a collective society, decided what time is to make it make sense and to make our brains not explode. and things like that. I would also say if you have any preconceived notions about psychedelics, I would encourage you to listen to Tim Ferriss talks a lot about psychedelics and kind of what they're being used for research. And so they do come into play here because that was a lot of my research to talk about that if you are traveling the multiverse, you're going to need a psychedelic because it's going to hurt your brain. And the psychedelic makes it just, okay, I'm not going to have a mental breakdown right now. So if you are somebody who's opposed to psychedelics, well,
yeah. So what is your favorite genre for yourself to read then? Are you all about the science fiction and this type of stuff, or do you ever branch out into fantasy or anything?
So I do read science fiction. I definitely read more on the speculative fiction spectrum within science fiction. I think I just like those questions of like, what if one little thing was different instead of the massive, like I don't do as many space operas or things like that, just because I kind of like being in this reality or something that looks a little bit like this reality, but like one or two things are different. So I definitely like to read speculative fiction. But I would say since I had a baby, sometimes I just need what I call easy peasy readsies. Like I'm just like, what's the latest romance that's like hot right now? Boom. Like I just need something that's easy. I can just flip the pages and I don't have to think. But then I kind of flip back and forth. So I'm like, I need something serious and heavy, and then I need something super light. And I end up reading a lot more like fantasy and like YA books, but like I read them and I'm like, well, because it was an alternate history and like I write alternate history in this book, so I need to read it. And people are like, but that's YA. And I'm like, and like, and so that's, I definitely read all over the place. And if it sounds like a good plot, I'll read it regardless of what the genre is. But I would say the certain like standards for certain genres just don't appeal to me. Like I ended up reading Outlander. Let me tell you, I had to skip half of it. I have to read a description of a thistle one more time. No, like get to the point. And but like people who like that genre like that. And I'm like, just get to the plot. Like I can't. Yeah.
But yeah, having like a palate cleanser between is really good too, because within the science fiction genre, like I read a lot of science fiction. I read the space operas, I read the fantasy, but every once in a while you need just like a really quick romance, little rom-com to just spice it up a little bit and just reset your brain, or maybe put a personal development book in there. So yeah, switch it up. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm starting to read more craft books.
Okay.
Which is good. It also makes me rethink everything I've ever done. So I have to read those sparingly. Otherwise, I'm just like, no, I messed everything up. And then I'm like, no, it's fine. Just next book. But I would say the one nice thing about self-publishing is, so Nailbiters was the first book I ever published. And I went back and I reread it, and I actually recorded the audiobook before I went into some of the heavy writing for architects. I had like some ideas down, and I realized all the things that I was like, this is not right. Like this sentence, like this, I could clean this up. And so I ended up doing a second edition of it just to clean it up, just because I was like, I don't, for as much as I want people to see my growth, I'm like, they can still see that I've grown. Like they don't need to see all those things. And so I would say that's almost the nice benefit that we have, is that we can go back and we can fix things that are just inherently, we're like, wrong. I didn't change any substantive parts of the plot or any plot devices, but like I could still clean it up. And so that's one nice thing we have. So
all right. Well, we talked a lot about your book. We talked about some of the other stuff that you've written. And is there anything else that you want to share that's coming up in the future? Anything you want to share with readers or listeners?
I know I talked about, I'm working on the next books in the series. I'm working on some other fun items. That's really what's on the horizon for me. I have a YouTube channel where I also talk about self-publishing, and I announced today, as we're recording, not today, as people are listening, that like I'm taking a bit of a break for the summer. So like I pre-recorded everything, it's already edited, and now I'm just giving myself the summer just to focus on writing, because I keep giving myself excuses to not write. I'm like, I can just do this, or I can just do this, or what about this? And I just need to get back into that habit of writing. So that's my focus right now. So yeah.
That's exciting. Get more books out and readers can read more. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, this is Read It with Whiskey. It would not be Read It with Whiskey without talking a little bit about whiskey. So MK, what's your favorite whiskey to drink?
So my go-to is actually a bourbon. It's called Old Granddad bourbon. It's really good. That's what my dad always drank when I was growing up. That's what he taught me to drink with. So that's my standard. Very
nice. I don't know if I've tried that one.
It's really hard to find it.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, I try to go, whenever I go to liquor stores, I try to find something new that I haven't tried yet. That's like one of my go-to things right now. So I'll have to keep an eye out for that one. All right. So yes, plug your YouTube channel, all of the places where people can find you, your books, and follow along with your journey.
Okay. Well, I'm MK Williams. You can find me at one MK Williams, like the number one MKWilliams.com. I used to say it's because I'm the one MK Williams, but there is another MK Williams, and he's a dude. So you're going to know it's me because I'm a female. And so all my books are available 1mkwilliams.com, at 1mkwilliams, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And then my nonfiction series is all under Author Your Ambition. So if you're on YouTube, you have questions about self-publishing, some of like the nitty-gritty, like how do I do this thing? Or like, why won't KDP let me do this? You'll probably see me pop up. If not, just YouTube, Author Your Ambition, MK Williams, and my videos will pop up.
All right. Well, yay. And I'll have all of that linked for our listeners in our description here. So thank you so much, MK, for being on the show. We've had so much fun talking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I hope you all enjoy reading in all the multiverses where you are currently reading.
What a blast contemplating other multiverses. I really thought about this a lot after I finished reading this book. I read the book so quickly and then I couldn't get it out of my head. It was stuck there for so long. And honestly, I'm just so glad that it did stick around because it makes me think about every single decision that I make and every single influence that I could possibly have on other people's lives. It's a really cool concept and it's kind of hard to grasp that idea of being part of more than just our universe. There is a multiverse out there, you guys. Such a cool concept. And speaking of multiverses or just being in a new place every single morning, this is a concept for our book that we're going to be talking about next time. So next time on Read It with Whiskey, we're going to be talking to Tanaya MKD, the author of New Identity. And this book, within the first couple chapters, this character wakes up in different bodies. And as I was reading this, I was getting the vibes of the infinite because you're waking up to a world that you don't recognize. And this character, she does, her mind and her consciousness transports to other bodies. What a cool concept. So navigate that, okay? We're going to talk all about it in the next episode. Talk to you then. You've been listening to an episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and I just wanted to personally hop in and say thank you so much for listening. Your support of the podcast means so much to me, and I would really appreciate it if you could go onto your favorite podcast platform and rate and review the show. By rating the show, you're going to help more people find the podcast so then we can grow. Once you review the show, share it on your social media, share your favorite episode with your friends, and come back next time to hear more from self-published authors. I'll talk to you soon.